Welcome to Ignite Your Confidence for women in leadership who want to speak up and stand out. I'm your host, Karen Laus. Here you'll get all of the tips and tools that you need to stand out with unshakable confidence. Let's dive into today's episode.
We're here with Becky. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Becky, before we jump into the question.
So I am a car crash test engineer. In addition to doing my technical research where I develop new car crash tests to help save people's lives, a lot of my roles and responsibilities are to communicate the results that we have with the general public. So that includes a lot of presentations, sitting in on technical meetings, and also doing some media interviews that include things like talking to reporters and giving television interviews.
Well, it's so cool what you do. I'm sure everybody's like, oh, tell me more. So what I'm thinking about related to, what this whole show is about is celebrating your voice, standing up and being confident, finding your voice. How would you say, if you could think about, was there one moment where you really realized, wow, I've found my voice, or I have stepped into my confidence?
Definitely. So there was a time that one of my senior colleagues, a vice president role, was scheduled to give a presentation, and he was unable to do so and said, Becky, I believe that you do a really great job giving this presentation. And so I call up the organizer of this event, and I was met with, oh, okay, if you really want to give this presentation. And it was so deflating in the moment, And so I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go there and I am going to wow them. They're going to, because they don't know me. They don't, they knew my colleague. They thought he was great. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to give it 110% and show them everything I've got. And the year after that, they didn't even ask my colleague. They were asking directly for me to come and give the presentation. And so, you have to have that confidence. You have to have that passion, I think, in order for people to see it and recognize it. But it was one of, I think, many, little things that make you think, wow, I'm doing a great job. So
that is so cool. Tell me how it felt when you wowed them.
It was really neat. And I'm in a very male-dominated profession where there are often times that I'm the only woman in the room or one of just a handful of women, sometimes especially the only one getting up in front of everyone and speaking. And so there's a lot of fear. People already have, in general, a fear of public speaking. And then you're standing there in front of people that may be a lot older, maybe a lot more advanced in their careers. And now you kind of stick out like a sore thumb. And so being able to go and project everything that I know and everything that I want to convey and do it with confidence, I think really resonates with people. I get so many compliments from people in different capacities that the way I present is entertaining, they stay engaged, and that my confidence definitely comes out during the presentations.
That's amazing. And when I think about what brought you to that place, can you think about what is it that has helped you the most? Maybe either a mentor or just anything about your upbringing that really contributed to stepping into that?
So I think the real secret is that confidence is a skill. It's not something that you're born with. It's not one of these, well, she's an extrovert, she's an introvert. It's not a category about your personality. It's something that you work on. It's something that if you have the passion and if you have the desire to continue to try to be more confident and work on the skills that show that, you can do that. I am an introvert by nature. Most engineers are. And I think that's a big part of what scares people for doing public speaking when you're in a technical field, is that you're not naturally that kind of person that wants to go out there and really show the world what you're doing. If you were to see me in a party environment, in a social environment, I'm in the corner. I'm trying to avoid people. I'm not that way. But confidence is a skill. And I think that to repeat that over and over again, it gives people hope. If you think that, oh, it's something that you're just born with, it's something that I can't attain because it's not something you can build, then you're going to start off defeated. But knowing that it's something that you can slowly work on and build your confidence and get to a point where you can be happy with the way that you project yourself, I think gives a lot of people that kind of hope. I can do this too.
Love it. What would you say is the number one tip you would give someone who is struggling with confidence?
Well, number one, start small. Start on things that are audiences where you can build that up. Remind yourself that you are the expert. Whatever you're talking about, whether it's in a meeting or in a public speaking environment, you're the expert, and know that your words will be taken as such if you speak it in that manner. I'll go and I'll talk to a reporter, and I know that they don't know my work. And if I mess up here or there or stumble over a few words or have to say, stop, let me think for a minute, no one's penalizing me for that. You also want to give yourself the grace to say, I don't know. I don't know has a lot more power than you think, because usually when you should be answering, I don't know, you're in a situation where you might not be the expert. You might not know all the things. And now you're going to start tripping up over words. Now you're going to not know what to say, or the follow-up question that you're given is something you just can't answer. So you're going down a path that isn't good, isn't going to lead you to be more confident. It's actually going to make you kind of shrink away from wanting to do these kinds of things. And people appreciate it. There are times that I will say, reporters might want me to get off totally on a different track, and it's something outside of my own expertise, and saying, I don't know, they move on. They don't look at it as you're ignorant, you don't know, you're not the expert. They recognize you can't be an expert in everything. So give yourself that opportunity to really, if you don't know, and say that with confidence too.
Love it. It's so true, isn't it? Just that conviction makes such a difference in our voices.
Huge.
Well, tell me about a time when you didn't speak up that you wish that you had.
Well, I think there are a lot of times. There are a lot of little times. It's a journey. Just like, confidence is a skill, being able to communicate in all the different aspects of your job in a way that's confident is totally a journey. And while I think I've really done a good job of projecting myself in these technical situations where I'm publicly speaking or talking about my technical work, there's definitely areas of improvement that I can make for advocating for my own self and my own job. Whether it's things like, we're conditioned as women often to say yes to everything at work, to always be, oh, I'll take that task and I'll take this task and I'll do all these things. And I've come to the realization recently that I was doing all of these things and saying yes to them all, which sounds good or seems like you're, being helpful. Well, some of my other coworkers were being more discriminatory about what things they said yes to and what things they say no to. And some of that is about confidence in your own abilities and confidence in where you want to be, showing that, saying, no, that task would distract me from doing my main project. And not just saying no for the sake of, no, I don't want to do that, but saying it in a way that then opens the door for, here's who I am, here's what my job is and isn't, and here's where I want to go with it. So there's definitely a lot of reflecting that I've been doing recently in that area as to how to best discriminate between those two things and ensure that I am projecting myself confidently in all aspects of my job.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, boundaries are so critical. And what we say yes to, we say no to something else and vice versa. So is there a specific time that you remember where you were really disappointed with yourself, or you made a mistake, or just anything that would connect the listeners to something specific?
I would say there's always times in meetings, especially brainstorming meetings, where you are sitting on that really great idea and you want to say something and someone else is talking and you don't want to interrupt them. And you just want to be like, all right, as soon as that person stops, I'm going to interject. And then someone else cuts you off. And you wish that you were the one that had announced, well, I really want to study bicycle helmets, and just kind of spit out whatever it is. And then 3 people later, someone else says, well, what about bicycle helmets? So I definitely have experienced it even at that level of, as a specific example, to just make sure that your voice is heard. And what's the worst thing that can happen if you come up with a crazy idea? It gets turned down.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe people talk about it at the water cooler for the next day, but I mean, 6 months later, no one's saying, oh, she wanted to study, Bozo the Clown and riding in a car. Like, people get over it. And that's a lot of things are your fear of this somehow negatively affecting you, the thing that you're going to say or the thing that you're going to propose. And you need to give yourself the grace to just let it go too.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's my story too, about just being in a leadership role and still feeling like, oh, maybe this person knows more than me, or maybe that person isn't going to approve of my idea. And you're absolutely right. And I think it's just so interesting how we can tend to fixate on things that we've said and nobody really cares. I mean, we don't, the whole thing about we get so fixated on ourselves. And I understand that too from my own insecurities. But then I think that perspective is so important to remember, that nobody's going to be thinking about this, probably not even a couple days from then, but certainly not 6 months away.
And when you're sitting back and listening to your colleagues, especially, in a male-dominated field like I'm in, you hear some of your male colleagues offering up equally silly, ideas, and they're not spending the rest of the day wringing their hands over it.
Right.
They threw it out there. Sometimes they're even more senior than me. They threw out a kind of a crazy, loony idea. The other people gave it a nah, and then they moved on. Mm-hmm. So, to some extent, we need to, again, remind ourselves to let go.
Yeah.
And what's the worst that can happen by speaking up, by saying something? Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing bad.
Exactly. Well, and I think if anything, people look at you like, oh, gosh, how cool that she said something. I mean, I think that people see, and if nothing else, it's great visibility. Because I know for me, years ago, I remember my boss at the time just said, we want to hear more from you. It's important that you start speaking up. So she was such a good coach. And it's interesting how you can just have these feelings of, well, trying to be perfect. I think that's another challenge that a lot of women have. But for you, what would you say is the biggest? I know we kind of covered this a little bit, but I'd love to hear the biggest challenge for you. If you just think about the biggest challenge as a woman working in a male-dominated industry, what would the one thing be?
We are faced with so much implicit bias, so much of you can't be it all. And on top of it, we as a culture, women are taught this unattainable level of perfection. And luckily it's something that hasn't affected me as much as some other people. But even in the college level, I noticed a lot of the women engineers, which in my field, there's only about 10% women engineers in mechanical and that level of industry. So many women were defeated early on from not being perfect anymore. There are weed out classes where you're not going to get the A unless you are a genius and you're going to a really great school like Purdue, West Lafayette, or Wisconsin, where I got my undergrad. But you're going to a school with other really smart people. There's no way you're all going to get the A. It's about persistence. It's about sticking with it, not giving up. It's not about perfection anymore. And so I saw so many women quitting, deciding that engineering wasn't for them because they weren't getting the A's in classes. They were still passing. And my male counterparts were accepting the C, putting it in their book and keeping going. And they're the ones that graduate with a degree. They're the ones that are getting a job because at some point it doesn't matter whether you had the 4.0 or the 3.0. you get a job and nobody asks for your transcript ever again, ever, really. And it's all then about the quality of work that you do. But science is so hard because there is a lot of failure. The answer isn't out there. You don't know what's going to happen in your experiments. Otherwise, you wouldn't have to do it. And when there is a failure, you have to figure out how to pick yourself back up and keep going.
Yeah, well, that's a good segue. What is a mistake or failure that you made that you just go, oh, whatever that might be, and then how did you learn from it? Or what did you learn from it?
Boy, that is a tough one to put into a specific example. But I would say, from a technical standpoint, some of the research that I'm doing on my side impact program, we had all these ideas. We did all this research. We thought calculations, everything put together. All right, this is how we think these tests are going to turn out. It's going to be a winner. We run the tests and it's a failure. And everyone looks at me like, what's the next step? And it's definitely a moment where, again, you have to show leadership. You have to show confidence in, okay, I had this whole packet of calculations that suggested this was the winner, and it's not. Where do we go from here? And you don't have to have an immediate response. And I think that's another important thing, is when you have a failure, giving yourself the time to sit and reflect, to understand, to maybe even go through a range of emotions, whether you're angry, you're sad, you're frustrated with yourself, and then come up with a plan and figure out how you're going to get past this. So if you're struggling with public speaking, come up with a plan of how you can take little chunks and do things in little increments to get closer to your goal. Figuring out, what information, what knowledge can you bring in? And that's on a technical or just a personal standpoint. Get mentors. That's definitely one area that I feel like sometimes I came to a realization recently that some of my mentors, I had lost a lot of them. They had either retired, moved to different industries. I hadn't been actively keeping up with refreshing my group of mentors and keeping them updated. And it's a collaborative thing. It's not like a one-sided, just, this person's older than me and they give me advice. There's ways I can give advice in different methods too. So that's something that I've worked on this summer, is that I came to the realization I was missing this part of my ability to move ahead and learn from the advice and the criticism of mentors. And you have to be open to criticism with the right heart, with the right meaning. And so I'm like, okay, everyone's at home this summer. No one's doing anything. People are socially deprived because they can't go out and do things. I bet if I start emailing people and say, hey, let's have like a virtual coffee chat for a half an hour, let's just catch up. And every single person that I have emailed has said yes. And we've had chats. So I've been doing like one a week with different people. And it gives you an outsider perspective on how others see me. And that's feedback that I can then use too, in addition to my own, voice and how I see me, which is often much tougher than anybody else sees you. We're always the hardest on ourselves. So getting that information, gathering it, and figuring out, again, those incremental steps that we can take to get to where we want to go.
Yeah, that's so good. Such good reminders. Well, this has been fabulous. Let's move into the lightning round of questions. So as a reminder, just whatever's on your mind. I'll make some are a little easier, some are I have to think a little more. All right. Tell us your guilty pleasure or just pleasure on Netflix.
I finished Tiger King recently. How is that not a guilty pleasure, right?
It's a very popular pleasure, I will say that. How about your first concert?
I think I went to Green Day / Blink 182 but I've actually gone to 5 different Tom Petty concerts, including one where I was upgraded to the front row.
Whoa.
Favorite concert ever.
Oh my gosh. That's so cool. Where was your first kiss?
On the front porch of my parents' house.
Oh, nice. What's on your nightstand right now that you'd be willing to share with us?
I have a computer. I'm guilty of being one of those people, even though they say you're not supposed to have like your electronics right there. And dog bones, because we have 2 dogs. And so there's usually a dog bone or crumbs from bones that have been stolen.
How about the last book you read?
Girl Stop Apologizing by Rachel Hollis. And that's also something I highly recommend to people. It is a book that I recommended to a colleague of mine who was struggling with confidence issues. There's one particular chapter in there about I'm not enough, the lie, I'm not enough. And I highly recommend people read that because it has so much to do with confidence. You think you're not good enough. You think you're not smart enough, tall enough, pretty enough, educated enough, whatever, and you are. So
great. I love her, and I love that book as well. How about your favorite travel destination?
I've been there twice. It is Russia. So I would say Moscow and St. Petersburg are some absolutely fascinating places that you have to have some special inns to actually access. So gorgeous.
Love it. And let's end with, what is something that you never leave home without?
I have a little stuffed animal that hangs on my purse, and it's from my husband, and it's like a little reminder that he's always with me and always supporting me.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love it. Well, this has been awesome. So for people that want to reach out to you and connect, what is the best way to do that?
I am on LinkedIn. It's Becky C. Gunn, but it's also, if you look up my name, Becky Mueller, Mueller. And I am a crash test engineer. I don't think there's any other Becky Millers, but there might be. So that's the one to look for. And I look forward to connecting with people and just giving advice or getting advice wherever we can help each other.
And that's a wrap of another episode of Ignite Your Confidence. I'm your host, Karen Laus. Thank you so much for listening. If you loved today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review. It helps other people find the podcast faster, and it certainly helps me. If you're interested in more tips and tools around confidence, please join me over in my Facebook group called Ignite Your Confidence with Karen Laus. Remember, you too can stand out with unshakable confidence.